maragwe. This one cooks faster, but it doesn't mean it's superior. This was pushed by colonizers, while our own beans, which were rich, tougher, and more complete, were downgraded as poor man's food. Now, in truth, these indigenous beans were the real superfoods that carried Africa through famine and drought. Now, wait, you will see them somewhere in London, going for maybe 20 pounds a kilo, labeled what? Superfood. Now, across the continent, Africa is facing a silent epidemic of non-communicable diseases. You know, we have the hypertension, diabetes, heart diseases, and obesity. Unlike infectious diseases, these ones don't just spread from person to person. Instead, they creep in through our diets, our lifestyles, and the foods we eat every single day. And guys, as I come here and teach you these things, trust me, I am also making sure. I'm imagining they would maybe take a look at something like moringa. This is moringa powder. And they would smell and be like, oh my God, that's very disgusting. What is that? Disgusting, you know? Yet today, these foods are sitting in healthy stores or health stores across Europe and America with shiny labels that read superfood. Can you imagine the irony of finding something like teff here from Ethiopia? This thing was just a humble grain used for injera in Ethiopia. But now it's being sold in London for 10 pounds a kilo as a gluten-free miracle. What happened to their gluten wheat? Now they're selling these things very expensive in Europe. You know, 10 pounds. Do you know how much that is for a kilo? Our baobab, I could not even find baobab, guys. This was just an amazing fruit that children chewed in the village. Now, it is powdered and bottled in Europe as a premium antioxidant drink. Fonio, guys, you'll just have to see that one on your screen. Once dismissed as the hungry season food in West Africa, is now paraded in Paris restaurants as a gourmet delicacy. And hudia, one that I could not even find, a cactus the sun used for centuries to suppress hunger, was patented in South Africa and even licensed to Pfizer in the US, pitched as the next billion-dollar appetite suppressant drug. Guy, do you see the irony? The same crops that once fed us in silence, foods that we were told to abandon, are now celebrated globally. Not because the world suddenly respects Africa or African food, but because someone figured out how to patent, rebrand, and profit from them. And we will get to how they even patented some of these foods. And when Europe and America are cashing in on our heritage, Africa's dinner plate has been dominated by one crop that is not even ours. Don't worry, we'll talk about this in a while, but in a few, but let me bring this crop here. Yeah? This table is gonna be full by the time we are winding up. You see, this crop was not even ours. And it did not come here to nourish us, but to control us. And we are talking about maize. When this maize, it's grinded, this is the product. You have your flour here. When this flour is used to make a meal, some people will call it ugali, pap, saza, nsima. I don't know what you call it in your nation. In Kenya, people call it ugali, and in South Africa, it's pap. South Africa or Zimbabwe, I don't know, one of them it's pap. Now, this is the daily food for millions, ugali. But here is the uncomfortable truth. This maize right here is not even African. It was born in Mexico thousands of years ago. The Portuguese brought it here in 1500s, not as a gift, but as a tool. Maize was actually food for slaves. And they loved it because maize was very cheap, fast growing, and produced bulk calories, not nutrients, bulk calories that they could store and ration out. It wasn't more nutritious. In fact, our own crops Let me put that there. Our own crops, the sorghums here, the millets over there, folio, African rice. I could not even find African rice again. Were far richer in iron, zinc, protein, and very resilient. But maize fit the colonial agenda. It was easy to grow in bulk, easy to mill, perfect to feed enslaved Africans on ships, and later African laborers in mines and plantations. Now, by the 1800s, colonial governments actively pushed Africans to abandon indigenous foods. Maize was marketed as the modern staple food, while our real foods were mocked as primitive. Yet it filled stomachs, yes, but it also left people empty of nutrition. And here's why. This maize is mostly starch with very little protein, and the vitamin niacin is locked inside, unusable by the body. Now, in Mexico, people cooked it with lime and ash. You know, when I found out that, I was like, I've been actually cooking maize my whole life, and I never knew that you are supposed to even cook it with lime and ash. Did you know that? This is a process called nixtamalization, and it was meant to unlock the nutrients. But that knowledge never came to Africa. Africans, I don't know if it's me or it's you who is watching. If you've ever put ash and lime in your maize, let me know. Because that knowledge never came. And if it came, not so many people know about it. So when we began relying only on maize, a hidden killer followed. And this killer is pellagra. Pellagra was called the disease of the 3Ds. First, dermatitis. These are just painful rashes across the skin. Then diarrhea, you know what diarrhea is, and then dementia. But finally, we have the fourth D, and this D is death. In South African mines, where black workers lived only on maize, porridge, etc., pellagra spread like wildfire. Men were covered in sores, too weak to work. Some were even losing their minds. In Malawi, Zimbabwe, and Tanzania, colonial reports describe villages where children's skin peeled and mothers slipped into madness. This thing made our people go mad. This thing, this maize. Now, fast forward to today, Africa grows nearly 100 million tons of maize a year. 100 million tons of maize, you hear? But this is still not enough for the 1.4 billion of us. So whenever drought hits, we import millions more tons, mostly from the US or Brazil. And here's the absurd part. In those countries, 60% of maize feeds animals. 30% goes into biofuel, and barely 10% touches a human plate. Guy, like we have, as we eat this every single day, to them it's eaten by animals, or it goes to biofuel, and only 10% of it makes to their own tables. But as we are consuming it every single day. Up north, their maize feeds cows and cars, but here it feeds our children, and yet it's never enough. That's not just hunger, that's dependency. It's control. Now, I know you saw something else here that looked like maize, but this is not maize. This is sweet corn. This is sweet corn. And of course, both of them may be maize, but the story of how they are grown and consumed exposes a deeper injustice in global food systems. In the West, particularly the United States, Canada, and many parts of Europe, sweet corn is the variety reserved for human consumption. You see, as here we eat this, then they eat this. This here is loaded with vitamins, fiber, and antioxidants. It is treated as vegetable, a healthy addition to their meals, and is widely available. They put it in cans, they freeze it, or even fresh. Field corn, this here, on the other hand, is a starchy, heavy variety with far less nutritional value. Grown mostly, as we said, for livestock feed, biofuels, and industrial uses in those same Western nations. Now, this imbalance here reflects more than just agricultural choices. It mirrors a deliberate divide. The West reserved sweet corn, the sweeter, healthier, more nourishing maize for themselves, while promoting field corn in Africa. A variety never intended to be the foundation of human diets. Now, what feeds animals in the West became the food of millions of people in Africa, a telling sign of how global food politics often place profit and control above nutrition and equity. And then you will see, even in our schools, maize, ugali, githeri, etc., porridge. This is what we feed our children, even in school. Right? Now, let's go to something else. For thousands of years, West Africans cultivated, let me just put this maize there. I'm even allergic to maize right now. That kind of maize. I guess I'll just reserve the corn. Now, as I was saying, West African countries cultivated their own African rice. It was very nutritious, and it breaks my soul because even when I was looking for African rice, I could not be able to find African rice. You know what I found? This is what I found. This is what is easily accessible. This rice right here. This one came with the colonial traders. This is the Asian white rice. It looks very clean, modern, but the polishing has stripped away its nutrients and fiber. What is left here? Starch, empty calories. This is what is left in this bowl. And then the irony, as I said, you will not be able to even find African rice in our markets. African rice was very ridiculed. It was termed backward, and slowly it disappeared from our own diets and even our own farms. Today, Africa eats over 40 million tons of rice a year, but again, we produce less than half of that. Billions of dollars are leaving Africa every year to buy rice from India, Thailand, and Vietnam. Meanwhile, our farmers remain poor and our heritage grain is almost forgotten. I dare you, try and go find African rice. Please, and when you find out where you can buy it, let us know in the comments section, because this rice will fill our stomachs. By the way, when you eat it, you feel full, but it drains our pockets, it weakens our health, and also erases our history. This is rice without a soul for African people. This rice has no soul. Zero. Now, long before cassava and maize arrived on our shores, Africa had her own roots, yams. You know what was easier? Scholar, maybe pass me these cassavas. The easiest part was how quickly we were able to find cassavas in our markets, but we could not find yams. These are cassavas. We'll talk about them in a few. Now, in West Africa, yams were not just food. And I hope you can be able to see the image of yams in your screen or on your screen. Yams were identity. For thousands of years, communities cultivated them, and when harvest came, entire villages would gather for the new yam festival. Can you imagine there were festivals dedicated to yams? I hope they are still there in West Africa. Yams were very sacred. They symbolized wealth, fertility, and status. A man's worth could actually be measured by the size of his yam bun or the amount of yams he has, Families roasted them, boiled them, pounded them into whatever it is that they needed to do the fufus, and they shared them with pride. But then came the colonizers who dismissed yams as backward, as the food of peasants. They brought this rice and wheat as symbols of progress, and slowly the very crop that once defined our dignity was reduced to poor man's food, and yet yams remain richer in nutrients than cassavas. They are more sustaining than this white rice and more African than any food the colonizers forced us onto. Now, to forget yams is to forget ourselves, to forget our identity. Higher, let me get the Warus. My Waru people, where are you? Because I got news for you. Nyandarua people. Waruza Nyandarua. By the way, is Kavede Kazoze. Where is she? Eha. Here, Irish potatoes. This is what we call waru in Kenya. This was never ours. This was never ours. Did you know waru was never ours? Okay, this was born in South America, taken to Europe by Spanish ships. Spanish ships. Ships. Guys, I'm sorry, I'm just laughing because, okay, guys, stop it. Just that one. Spanish ships. Okay. Okay, and only came to Africa through colonial settlers. That alone tells us it is a colonial food, not part of our indigenous heritage. Yeah, potatoes can be boiled, fried, or mashed, however you make it. But that is where it ends. They were never sacred in our culture. They actually never carried any meaning, and they also carry no nutrients. They are meaningless, nutrientless. Man, I love the warus. But they never carried any meaning the way yams did, or tied us to the land the way other parts of our foods did. These warus were simply a cheap colonial crop introduced to keep people fed and dependent on what the colonizer controlled. And history proves their weakness. In Ireland, when people relied on potatoes alone, a single disease wiped them out and left over 1 million people dead. Those are facts, guys. Compare now these things to yams. Yams are very diverse, resilient, and they are also celebrated in festivals. They are stored in barns as symbols of wealth and identity. So while waru is very popular today, we must be honest. This is a colonial food. It fills the stomach, but it cannot replace what yams and other African roots gave us, both nutrition and identity-wise. Even in nutrients, the difference is very clear. Yams carry more protein, more fiber, and more long-lasting energy. They are our food for both body and spirit. Warus, potatoes, on the other hand, are mostly starch, burning out quickly and offering little to our bodies. One will definitely fill the belly for survival. The other, yams, sustain a people with strength and dignity. This is why yams were wealth and waru was just a colonial filler. My Nyandarua people, this thing just fills you up. Now, let's move to beans. Imagine, guys, I don't feel like putting them on the table. Let me just put them aside because we are divorced to warus. Let's move to beans. Maharagwe. Africa had our own beans, right? Long before this maharagwe came, we had kunde, but here I have mbaazi, and we also had njugumawe or okpa or bambara groundnuts. These were very tough crops that thrived in poor soils and harsh seasons, giving families steady food when other crops failed. Now, in terms of nutrients, they were very stronger. Kunde carried more protein than maharagwe, and even its leaves, I think we have the kunde leaves here, yeah. These leaves here added vitamins. Mbaazi here was rich in protein, fiber, and also minerals, and survived droughts. Now, njugumawe, I could not find that, was so balanced in protein, carbohydrates, and fats that it was called the poor man's meat. Kula nyama. This thing is funny. They even called it the poor man's meat. You see, now this maharagwe that was brought from South America by Portuguese traders spread quickly because it cooked faster and gave good harvest. Have you ever seen how people talk about mbaazi? At me, I can't boil mbaazi, they take forever. Now, can you imagine getting a substitute for maharagwe? This one cooks faster, but it doesn't feel it's superior. This was pushed by colonizers, while our own beans, which were rich, tougher, and more complete, were downgraded as poor man's food. Now, in truth, these indigenous beans were the real superfoods that carried Africa through famine and drought. Now, wait, you will see them somewhere in London, going for maybe 20 pounds a kilo. Labeled what? Superfood. Now, across the continent, Africa is facing a silent epidemic of non-communicable diseases. You know, we have the hypertension, diabetes, heart diseases, and obesity. Unlike infectious diseases, these ones don't just spread from person to person. Instead, they creep in through our diets, our lifestyles, and the foods we eat every single day. And guys, as I come here and teach you these things, trust me, I am also making sure that whatever I'm consuming is well informed. Let me sip my juice because I never thought I would be drinking these things. Hmm? Now, for example, national surveys show that about 24 to 29% of adults in Kenya are hypertensive, and that could be me and you, which translates to roughly 3 out of every 10 people. Now, diabetes, while less common, affects about 2% of the adult population, around 1 in every 50 Kenyans. But before colonialism, African communities thrived on a rich diversity of indigenous foods. We are talking about the millets, the sorghums, right? The yams, our own beans, the mbaazi's, leafy vegetables. We are talking about our managu, the pumpkin leaves. We have so many here, the saga. These ones were very, very, very high in fiber. Okay, slow digesting and very nutrient rich. They protected the body, kept energy levels balanced, and rarely led to lifestyle diseases. But you see, now came the colonial era. European settlers introduced these things, the maize, the polished rice, Irish potatoes, all these starchy foods that could be grown in bulk to feed laborers and soldiers. I'm sure at the back of their houses, they were eating something else very different. These crops were not introduced for African health. They did not care about you. This was for colonial convenience and control. Over time, what have these foods done? They have created over dependency, displacing indigenous foods. Now, take the case of central Kenya, where I come from. Here, warus, these warus are more than just food. This is a cultural identity. I mean, that is why you'll hear people say, watu wa central anapenda waru, wekwe soup. Now, a meal without potatoes feels incomplete. And then you mix that with maize. You do the mokimo thing. And if you're not doing that, you're doing ugali. And then rice. Rice has become a symbol of luxury, a symbol of celebration. I mean, Sundays, I remember it was a big deal, houses cooking rice or chapatis, because this is a symbol of us celebrating how good the week had been. Let's reward ourselves with some rice or some chapatis. But this heavy reliance on starch food that are very low in nutrient has come with a cost. And you can see the cost is those non-communicable diseases. You know, sometimes as we were setting this up, Muga said, by the way, now, you know, our grandparents used to eat these things. And it was even hard because we could not even figure out which was which because of how rare we see these things. So you can imagine, these are foods that our ancestors thrived on. Now, we can barely even recognize them. Let's go to coffee. Yes, I had coffee here from the word go because unlike people who claim coffee is theirs, coffee is very, very African. But I'll let you know why we're touching on it. These are coffee beans. There's a reason we also made sure we brought in coffee beans because this is what we actually export. And then they do what they do best. They package it and we buy it again. Coffee here was born in Ethiopia, in Kaffa. Yes, you hear coffee, Kaffa. That's literally where the word comes from. Our ancestors in Ethiopia did not commercialize it. You know, its use was very simple. They used it for health, energy, and it was also ceremonial. The Oromo mixed these coffee beans with fat for long journeys. Others brewed it slowly for spiritual rituals. Coffee was very sacred. But once Arabs carried the seeds to Yemen, and Europeans discovered the drink, coffee stopped being culture and became cash. By the late 1800s, colonial governments in Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, Rwanda, and Burundi forced Africans to grow it under brutal taxes and restrictions. In Kenya, Africans were. How did our ancestors survive these people? Huh? How did they survive these people? And then, we can't talk about coffee without talking about tea. Because coffee and tea, especially here, they go hand in hand. Tea was brought to Kenya in 1903 by the British, planted on stolen land, grown by African labor. It was not for us. It was for Britain's tea obsession. You know how they call it the high tea? Guys, when you go celebrating this, you know what you're also celebrating. It's a learning session here. It was for Britain's obsession. Now, a century later, Kenya is the third largest tea exporter in the world, yet the wealth sits in European trading houses. Please, when we were in school and we were talking about how Kenya is good coffee and tea, I always thought the money was ours. But the money was never ours, because if the money was ours, my grandpa had a coffee farm. Please, show me where it went. All those people who have tea farms right now, majority of them live in poverty. And then it doesn't help that some of these colonial structures still exist. You pass near major tea farms and you see those houses and you are traumatized. I think we should actually start a petition to remove those colonial structures from the tea and coffee farms. They are very traumatizing, considering some of the things that happened to our ancestors in those places. Whether it was our own coffee or imported tea, the story is just the same. Even if I talk about another thing, the story is just the same. Africans, we were growing it. Europe will drink it, and the profits will never stay here in Africa. It stays there. The story of coffee for me is very painful, considering I have even documented a story. I think I'm going to put it for you on the description, where this family actually grows coffee, but they were actually telling us, coffee is not for us, because even the limitations, the strictness in how coffee, what happens to coffee, not the coffee beans or the roasted beans. I think that's where our story ends. The strict laws around you even grinding it so that you can package it here and sell for yourself. That's a crazy story. I'll briefly touch on cotton and tobacco, because cotton again was never about feeding Africa. It was about feeding Manchester's textile mills. Colonial officers forced its cultivation across West Africa, Sudan, and Uganda. Families had to choose. You either grow food to survive or grow cotton to pay colonial taxes. Many chose cotton, and famines followed. Now, tobacco came from the Americans, but colonizers planted it on massive estates in Zimbabwe, Malawi, and South Africa. Africans were pulled into grueling labor. The product, cigarettes. Tobacco did not feed a soul. It built addictions, diseases, and profits for European companies. But cotton and tobacco did something very dangerous in Africa. They stole land from food crops. Our best soils were turned to fuel for Europe's factories and vices when Africans starved. But now, the foods once smoked. Let me first remove here what shouldn't be on this table. You guys go away. You're not even pretty. Yeah, give me Manago Scholar. Scholar is reminding me Manago belongs here. A lot of it. Yeah, these foods here, once smoked as weeds, or poor man's food, or smelly, are finally getting the recognition they deserve. And guys, I need us to walk this journey together. Take what you can for Here you have millets, 3 to 4 times more iron than maize. Very drought resistant. You get it? A gluten-free, ancient grain. Now they're calling them ancient grains. Very perfect for diabetes and drought. Then you have fonio. Unfortunately, we could not get fonio. Fonio matures in 6 weeks and grows in poor soils. Very rich in calcium and vitamin C. Then you have teff. Teflon Don. Tef, guys, Tef. Very high in protein and lysine for muscle health. Then you have my powder here, Moringa. This is the miracle tree. This one has vitamin A, calcium, potassium, and very complete in protein. No matter how. One can't get high on my own supply. Scratch that water. We don't do no, scratch that. I just said my own because this is all my food. Don't worry where I'm touching it. My hands are very clean. Then you have Hoodia. That was the sun survival cactus, which was later hijacked as a $1 billion weight loss pill. Then baobab, which is 6 times more vitamin C than oranges. Did you know that? Did you know baobab is actually 6 times more vitamin C than oranges? Now they are selling it as a superfruit in Europe. Superfruit in Europe. Then you have the tereres. I have the tereres here. A lot of beans here. These ones are packed with iron and folate, but they were dismissed as weeds. I mean, guys, when you see these things growing, you see weeds, right? I mean, we would step on them. These things, all of these, the sagas, the tereres, the managus, everything, we used to step on these things because as we needed posh things like rice. What are you telling us? They were called unsafe weeds. And then you have, where is the saga? I mixed them up. Yeah, right? Then you have saga here. Spider, this saga. It's very bitter, but it's very rich in beta carotene, calcium, and also it's an immunity booster. So when you are making your smoothie, make sure that you also blend together. Kundes, our kundes, right? You have them here. High in folate, iron, and vitamin C, and very perfect for protein balance. Then you have pumpkin. Yes, pumpkin leaves. Hey, did you have pumpkin leaves and seeds? You know, us all we had was pumpkin. Actually, we used to grow the seeds. Did anyone have pumpkin seeds here? Anyone ever eat? No. You see now, this like the whole thing. You have the seeds, the leaves, and the fruit itself. They're very good for immunity and men's health. So, men, I got you covered. If you need some of health, blend this or fry them. You know, true African yams, the ones we could not get here, they're very high in potassium and also very cultural to us. These foods never betrayed us. They kept our ancestors alive through droughts, wars, and famine. They were mocked out of our kitchens, and now the West sells them back to us in fancy packaging we can barely afford. I mean, wait till you see how moringa is packaged and then shipped back to you guys. Shipped back to you guys so that you can be able. Let me tell you guys, these people maximize on packaging. They make sure they get it from here, but they go and maximize the packaging. Let no one tell you that this coffee, by the way, once it's grinded, refined, and mixed, they will package it and we will buy this thing for almost 3,000 a kilo. And we move now to something very painful, patents and profits. Mocking our foods was only the opening act. It was only the opening act. Once the world realized their true value, because this is full of value, the mission shifted to ownership and profit. And I'm going to prove it to you. TEF. We have TEF here. In the 2000s, can you imagine? A Dutch entrepreneur patented Ethiopian TEF, the flour, and baked goods in Europe. Ethiopia, the birthplace of TEF, saw nothing. It's only later that courts struck down the patents, but the money was already gone. Can you imagine? How dare you patent TEF flour? How dare you? Then Hoodia. Hoodia, we spoke about it, but it was patented by South Africa's Research Council, then licensed to Pfizer, hyped as a $1 billion drug. The San people who had used it for centuries to suppress hunger were ignored, but it's only after global outrage did they get a 6% royalty deal. But again, they said the drug failed in trials. And now when you even go to Wikipedia, they will tell you along the lines, I saw it was marketed as fake. But the Sun used it for centuries to suppress hunger. But when they realize there's now people are catching up with you, the natives are catching up with you, they start now calling it fake. How dare you call what our ancestors used for centuries to suppress their own hunger? Exactly. They did not want to pay the 6% royalty. As Joshua is saying, that's a fact. Yeah, there's another one called rooibos. For decades, companies tried to trademark South Africa's red tea. I know if you're watching this from South Africa, you're familiar. In 2019, a deal finally recognized the Khoi and San as custodians of this red tea, giving them 1.5% of the farm gate price. Yeah, this was a very small victory, but a rare one. At least now opening their eyes to so many Africans that this is ours. Then you have Devil's Claw. You see how they name these things? Devil's Claw. It was used in Namibia and Botswana for healing, turned into a booming European herbal industry. Only in 2022 did Namibia force benefit sharing agreements. By the way, pay key attention to the names they call these things because they want us to know that, the connotation, devil and Africans. Even Africans will just look at it and say, this is the devil, I cannot drink or eat it. But then they are secretly harvesting it and making their own thing and then repackaging it, and then selling it back to Africa. Now, let's take a look at baobab, which was approved as a novel food in the European Union in 2008. Foreign farms rushed to dominate the supply chain. African producers are still getting pennies compared to the profits abroad. Every time Africa's knowledge proves valuable, someone else patents it, trademarks it, or even takes control of the supply chain. Sometimes we fight back and win a couple of small battles, but the bigger war, we are definitely still losing. Now let's take a look at the root of it all. The thread running through all of this is land. Colonialism was not just about borders or flags. It was about who controls the soil and what grows in it. Who controls the soil and what grows in it. That is why you guys are not even familiar with majority of these things here. Because again, as we said, the best lands were fenced off. Kenya's White Highlands were for settlers. There you get your best coffee and tea. Zimbabwe's estates were for tobacco. West African fields for cocoa and cotton. Can you hear anything African about those things? The only thing that was African was actually coffee, but have we identified coffee? The end product is never with us as Africans. Africans were pushed to marginal soils, told to abandon our own foods here, and forced into cash crop economies. Then independence came and someone will be like, okay, but the guys did not colonize you guys forever, so why could you not go back to your own foods? Where? Kwanzaa, did we ever receive that independence? Because you have independence, but the system stayed the same. You have governments that still rely on export crops to earn foreign exchange. I mean, if you listen to our presidents before Ruto and the previous presidents, you will hear them saying how much we are getting from coffee and tea, as if this is supposed to be our pride. But this is not our pride. This is the pride of the corrupt and the pride of global north. This has nothing to do with us as Africans. International lenders and trade deals keep Africa stuck in the same role. Grow for Europe and America, import what we eat. As Africans, we are just going for them, but we keep importing what we eat. We cannot even sustain our own population when it comes to maize and even rice. We cannot sustain. We have to keep importing from them. And that is why Africa exports cocoa, but you buy chocolate. We export tea leaves, but we import tea bags. We grow maize, but still beg for maize aid. Have you ever wondered why, by the way, in Africa we keep growing a lot of maize, and then when it's time for aid and droughts, we are happy when we see sacks of maize coming to us through aid. Here's the truth. The foods that carried us through famine and drought were never poor. These foods were very powerful. These foods were alive. The world mocked them and then rebranded them and now sells the same food back to us with a markup. And it's not just a slight markup, a crazy markup. Meanwhile, the crops that were forced onto us, maize, white rice, cotton, tobacco, they keep leaving us hungry and very dependent and sick and starchy with vitamins. Everything bad. Everything bad. If Africa doesn't reclaim our own foods, someone else will, and they've started reclaiming our food and patenting. And when these people continue owning our food, they will continue owning our future. Because food is not just what you eat, food is power. And until Africa controls her plate or what is in our table, Africa will never control our destiny. As Africans, we are never going to control our destiny if we cannot control what's on our tables. And guys, I'm telling you this, wait till you see me glowing here, because we have taken control of my health. I will not be lied to anymore. I don't want to see maize. I don't want to see rice. Waru, don't want to see. I don't care how crazy the cravings can get. I'm not interested. Actually, I think I'm going to look for sweet corn, so that I feel the luxury of eating this when they bring for us things they give their own animals. I don't want to feel like I'm robbing. I just want to feel like I have some power. Like I have some power in me. But for now, guys, let me go wash my managus and my vegetables. Make a good meal out of this, right? Look for where I can grind my coffee beans. Go and fry my pumpkin seeds here. Boil my mbaazi. Scholar, those maharagwes are not for our table. Go and boil my mbaazi. See where I can be able to also grind my teff, my sorghum and millet. Then I'll come later and I'll tell you how the diet was, guys. I know it's not an easy road, but look at it. We are struggling with so many health-related diseases. And I'm going to tell you, I'm not saying that I'm perfect now because I'm aware of what I'm eating. It's a journey, but we have to acknowledge that this was never poor man's food. You know, that thing grew to us that even when you would see your neighbors not eating rice, you would think of them as very poor. Hamkuli chapati kwenye mkulangi chapati. We are learning, unlearning and doing what? And relearning. Now when someone asks kwenye mkuli chapati should not be luxury, that is ignorance of the highest order. But I really want you guys to tell me what your take home has been from all this. These conversations are very necessary. And when you go deep, that is why now you realize why the control on our indigenous food is very crazy. Everyone wants to control what we are eating. That is why they are busy introducing these whole GMO things, because they know they do not want you to go back and grow in what is drought resistant. You know, when you go back and you look at it, we were meant to survive. But then we were not even meant to survive. We were meant to live this life so beautifully, because everything we needed, the Creator had already provided. The Creator had already provided. And you can imagine, even if I was to take some of these things down and add the rice and the flour here and the maize, you see the whiteness. You remember when we spoke about the psychology of colors? And now people will not even eat ugali if it looks a bit brownish. They want the pure white. That is actually how controlled we've been, and it's time for us to stop. It's time for us to go back to our normal brown ugali. There are some communities that I really admire from Kenya. The communities that stuck to the managus, the kundes, and everything. Man, you knew where the juice was at. You knew. But then psychologically, some of us were like, we saw that as such a bad thing. That was poor. That was poor man's food. Yeah, I know who is laughing now, of course you, but I hope we can be able to educate the rest of the generations to come that there was beauty in this table. Everything here was meant to work for us and not against us. And now I'm going to pose a challenge to you because there are so many foods that we've left out. I want you to take your time and look at what is in your plate right now and then do the homework of finding out where is the origin of this and how did it get to me? How did it get to me? Because now you see how expensive organic foods are, but these were organic from the word go. So I want you to take a look at what you're consuming right now and tell me on the comment section what has been the wake up call for you. Something you love eating, even if it's avocado. Let me see. Let's have fun on the comment section. Each of us, let's try and post something that we thought was even ours or something that we've discovered, the history of that thing. Let's put it on the comment section so that others can be able to learn. But I do appreciate you guys for tuning in. This is our new learning and learning and relearning. And if I just say how amazed I am at the feedback that you guys are giving our videos, some of you will think this is a flex, but it's been like it has really humbled me and it has really also warmed my heart just in that I was not the only person hungry for this kind of content. Yeah, just like you, I miss our one-on-one interviews, but they will come at their own given time. Creatively, I just feel like this is what I want to do right now. And I appreciate everyone that is commenting and saying, this has been very educative for me.